Throughout the past 3 years, seemingly every frame of Avengers Infinity War has been scoured and scrutinized by avid fans, looking for even more of the fascinating hidden details that lie below the surface, which make the MCU movies so enjoyable. With each passing rewatch, it seems there is no shortage of new details to uncover. And while the aspect of the film that we'll be covering today was realized some time ago, it is still worth diving into nonetheless, and it has to do with our favorite friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So stick with us, watchers of the Marvel Multiverse, as we delve into the details behind one of the most tragic and most emotionally impactful scenes in the history of the MCU, and delve into how much it actually teaches us about the web-slinger. In Infinity War, arguably one of the most heart-wrenching scenes comes just moments after the snap, when some of the most beloved MCU mainstays begin to fade away into clouds of dust. In the midst of the eerie sense of inevitable dread and irreparable defeat, Tom Holland's iteration of Peter Parker utters the now immortal words, "Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good," before collapsing into Tony Stark's arms and proceeding to beg to him. The scene is one of the most impactful and emotionally devastating scenes that we've seen to date in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, delivered excellently by the combined talent of Tom Holland and Robert Downey Jr. The scene continues to hit an area of sensitivity among fans despite knowing that Spider-Man is still alive and well in the current MCU. But while many fans were swept up in the emotional charge that Thanos had just brought onto our heroes and audiences alike, others were able to rewatch the scene with a more objective lens, and notice some curious details that stood out in Spider-Man's specific case. Though it seems to be used largely for dramatic effect, Peter seems to take an abnormally long time to actually fade into dust and drift away. And with the MCU, we've learned that nothing is done by accident, and there's always some deeper meaning going on. Whether the directors and executives had a previously determined explanation in place, or enthusiastic fans come up with their own explanations, there is always another layer to MCU properties, and lucky for us, Joe Russo has gone on record to confirm a popular fan theory regarding Peter Parker's dusting. Particularly, they comment on why it seemed to take so long than the rest of the other heroes. We see many of the heroes apparently realize that something is wrong as they begin to fade, not showing any indication that they knew what was coming beforehand. For all intents and purposes, it seems that each hero is completely unaware of their impending demise before it actually happens. The only other hero who gives any indication that they know what's going to happen before they physically start to dissolve is Doctor Strange. But we must remember that he knows everything that is set to happen along the course of Endgame, meaning he saw this coming far before Thanos had even snapped. So then why did Spidey seem to know what was going on before he began to fade away and dissolve into dust? Well, lucky for us, Joe Russo, one of the co-directors of Infinity War and Endgame, has gone on record to confirm a popular fan theory that Peter Parker's spider sense actually alerted him ahead of time. Though all he says in the interview is "that's correct," he is aware of something. The context of the interview confirms that they were in fact referring to his spider sense. This also likely fed into his impending sense of unstoppable inevitability, as his spider sense warned him that something was wrong, and he was likely next in line to be subjugated by the power of the snap. But since he didn't have anything to punch, dodge, or avoid, he fell into a full panic. Peter, throughout the course of not only the MCU, but his previous outings on the big and small screen alike, has most often had a direct physical stimulus alert him to this danger, be it the impending arrival of something that had been thrown at him, or the presence of a malicious figure. This acute danger sense, combined with his enhanced reflexes and flexibility, have almost always allowed him to respond appropriately, and get out of danger in time before any harm is caused. In this case, however, there is nothing to react or respond to. In addition to this, in a later interview, the Russo brothers were asked why Peter Parker was actually the last Avenger to disappear in all of Infinity War, and the last to be dusted. With this comes another chilling and heartbreaking explanation, as the Russo brothers went into detail that it was actually Peter Parker's will to stay there that kept him alive the longest, confirming that an individual's will does in fact have an impact on how long it takes for them to be dusted, and that out of all the heroes that were inevitably snapped away by Thanos, Peter Parker was the one that wanted to remain in the world the longest and wanted to die the least, afraid to leave Tony Stark, his aunt, and all of his friends. Out of all of the Avengers that were killed, the Russo brothers seemingly confirmed that Peter Parker's will was among the strongest. Not to mention that Peter Parker's spider sense was able to forewarn him of the impending doom that was upon him, and he was able to somewhat prepare himself, as he was one of the few Avengers that actually understood what was happening, or at least that something terrible was coming. For what is presumably the first time in Peter Parker's tenure as a hero, at least in the MCU, his spider sense is screaming at him, warning him that something is wrong and harm is inbound, and he is physically powerless to stop it. His senses are on overdrive, trying to find a way to help him out of this predicament, adding to the underlying sense of tragedy associated with this scene, as Peter spends his final moments listening to his internal instincts beg him to do something, and warn him that something terrible is about to happen to him. This also appears to be why Peter Parker is the only one of the Avengers that feels any sense of pain during the snap, as he tells Mr. Stark that he doesn't feel so good. It's not actually Peter Parker feeling pain from the snap itself, it's his senses going on overdrive, attempting to warn him that something is wrong, although Peter Parker cannot prevent it. Briefly going back to the idea of Peter Parker's will though keeping him alive the longest, we also see this in Avengers Endgame with Thanos himself, as it is Thanos' will that allows him to remain longer than the rest of his armada, being the Black Order or the rest of his army, as Thanos knows that the snap is coming and has the strongest will out of any of his men, same as Peter Parker, although Thanos apparently feels no pain unlike Spider-Man. Despite all his power and foreknowledge, Peter Parker is utterly helpless, left only to cling on to the one person he can trust in the moment, and beg for help before succumbing to his decimation. Though many fans have picked up on the fact that his spider sense was alerting him to the danger, taking a step back and thinking about what this means on a personal and internal level for Peter Parker adds another layer of helplessness and a sense of being utterly trapped by something he cannot fight back against. But anyway, my friends, what did you think of this? Did you catch on to this fact of Peter Parker's spider sense alerting him to the danger, or were you too swept away in the emotional weight of this scene to take notice? Also, what are your thoughts on Will actually keeping individuals alive for a short amount of time, even when pertaining to the snap? And how do you feel about both Peter Parker and Thanos, respectively, being the last to disappear among their groups? As always, my friends, thank you guys so much for watching the channel. Hit that subscribe button to assemble and join our team, and have a great day.